After the Civil War, the Bolling family lost their plantation home in Bedford County. In 1866, Edith Bolling Wilson's father moved his young family into this house. William Bolling joined the law practice of his uncle, General William Terry.
My father and mother had been born and bred in the eastern part of Virginia, where before the war, meaning the Civil War, there were slaves in abundance. But with the ending of the war, the old order passed, and they found themselves like thousands of others with everything swept away and no money. My father hoped to establish himself in the practice of law. With an invalid mother, a young and inexperienced wife, 2 babies, and no money, this was a grave problem. The one light in a dark world was the knowledge that in Wytheville we could at least have a roof over our heads, for here was this old house which my paternal grandfather had taken in payment for a debt. My parents arrived only to find this haven untenable, as it had been used for a Confederate hospital. But in time, it was scrubbed and patched and they moved in. 8 of my siblings and I were born here. Though this house was shabby and inadequate, material deficiencies were repaired by understanding, sympathy, and love, making it to us healthy, happy youngsters in every sense a home.
Today, this building looks very much as it did when the Bollings lived here from 1866 to 1899. The downstairs street-level storefronts were rented to businesses, and the entire upstairs was the Bolling home. Fireplaces provided heat for the family, as there was no electricity or inside plumbing. This room was altered in 1958 and has changed more than any other part of the home. Originally, there were 3 rooms in this space with a wide center hallway. It is believed that one of these rooms was the bedroom of Grandmother Bolling.
My grandmother Bolling's bedroom was in the center of the house and was big and square. In one corner of the room was a huge 4-poster bed, with a trundle bed underneath on which some of us children often slept. She was small, very thin and stooped, and Father had to carry her when she left the house. But when she met an obstacle, she would say with scorn, "I hate a can't. Anyone can do anything they try to." And she proved it. I was her favorite. She took to me and had nothing to do with my sister Bertha, 3 years older than me. This was not a bed of roses, for I slept with her and waited on her at any and all hours. It meant washing, ironing, and remaking the elaborate white caps which were fresh every other day, and taking care of her 26 canaries. But these duties had their generous compensations. She taught me nearly everything I know. She was never too sick or too tired or too busy to help me. She taught me to knit, to sew, to embroider, to crochet, and fit dresses. From her, I learned to read and write. She even tried to teach me French.
It was in this bedroom that Edith Bolling Wilson was born on a Monday morning at 9 o'clock, October 15th, 1872. This was the bedroom of her mother and father.
My mother had the purest spirit I have ever known. She was lovely physically, and no one ever heard her say an unkind thing. She had in all 11 children, with me being the 7th, and raised to maturity 9 of us. All this was done with the slenderest means, with inadequate servants, and despite personal privations. But she was always adequate and radiantly happy. I remember my mother with a baby on her lap and another tiny child at her knee. She was never too busy to stop and help us with French or music or anything except arithmetic. On that subject, she would say, "Wait until your father comes. I never bothered with figures." My mother and my grandmother made nearly everything we wore. My mother would sing as she sewed. She was educated when young ladies played the guitar, read French, embroidered, and sang to the accompaniment of the harpsichord. She made this house our home.
Judge Bolling's study, sometimes called the library, has changed very little over the years. The Bolling children spent memorable times with their father in this room.
My father, he was born in 1836 in Bedford County and studied law at the University of Virginia. He married my mother in 1860 and moved our family to Wytheville in 1866. Later, he became a judge of Wythe and Pulaski counties. We were members of St. John's Episcopal Church, located 1 block from our home. Church was very important to our family. I was baptized, confirmed, and married my first husband, Norman Galt, at St. John's Episcopal Church. I adored my papa. To all of us, he was not only a father, but a comrade who shared our joys and sorrows, who understood our complexities and taught us all we knew of fine principles and real Christianity. He was never too occupied to listen and to help us in anything, great or small. We went to him with childish troubles, and as we grew older, sought his advice on graver things. When we were grown, it was Father who sat up for us late in the evenings, and we confided all things to him. His death left a void in my life that still throbs with pain.
This room is believed to have served as one of the bedrooms for the large family. There were 2 grandmothers, parents, many children, aunts, and cousins residing in the Bolling home. As was the fashion for the 1800s, when guests of the family visited, they would often stay for long periods of time.
The autumn I was born, an old friend, Mrs. Stewart, arrived to spend a few days in the house as a guest, and she stayed for 4 months. When Mrs. Stewart left, she took me in her arms to say goodbye and put a tiny $10 gold piece in my hand. As she put me in the cradle, she told my grandmother that she put a Christmas present in my hand, and then told her not to let me forget her. My grandmother took the gold piece for safekeeping. When I was older, I was told of this fortune. Whenever I needed anything, I would go to my grandmother and say, "Please give me my $10 as I need it." My grandmother would instead give me a lesser amount of money, keeping the gold piece safe. Truly, Mrs. Stewart was never forgotten, as my grandmother kept her memory bright by acting as my banker.
The original open porch was a gathering place for the family on warm summer nights, and looked very much like it does today. Edith, at age 13, was photographed on this porch sitting beside the chimney, with Grandmother Bolling's bird cages to her right.
What was the greatest hardship of my young life? It was taking care of the cages for 26 canaries and acting as providence for them in births, deaths, and the raising of their broods. This care was done every day under my grandmother Bolling's personal supervision and direction, and never allowed to be slighted. Personally, the only real fun I ever got out of the canaries was when we would find a young one that had been crowded out of the flannel-lined nest and lay stark and hideous on the floor of its cage, awaiting burial. Then my brother Will, who became a doctor and has healed so many sufferers, would act as high priest. We would put the little dead bird in a spool box, place it in our red wagon, and have the interment in the bird cemetery we had laid out in the garden by the stable. We would go to the marble yard and get a chip cut from a big slab and write on it the name and date of the death of the deceased.
To the right, the original kitchen has been divided by a wall constructed in the 1950s. Behind the wall is the 1800s kitchen with the original flooring, fireplace, mantel, and hearth. The built-in dish cabinet of the kitchen held the flow blue china of the Bolling family, dating back to the 1840s.
I never again expect to taste anything comparable to the coconut balls my grandmother Logwood made at Christmas, or anything so good as her pralines of pecan nuts and brown sugar. My grandmother Logwood stood very tall and erect. As a little girl, she was never allowed to sit touching the back of her chair. It was considered inelegant for a lady. She sat straight as an arrow and carried herself with the dignity of a queen.
The large parlor was the room where the Bolling family would gather as a family, entertain friends, and where Judge Bolling may have seen clients.
Our family would draw together around the fireplace in the evenings as Papa read from Dickens or Shakespeare. Grandmother would knit as Papa read, and I always associate his beautiful voice with the click of the fine steel needles. Our family was a large one with 11 children. My oldest brother, Rolf, 11 years my senior, grew up to become a banker in Abingdon. He attended private schools. I never left Wytheville until I was 12 and was educated at home by my parents and grandmother. It was Rolf who insisted on my 15th birthday that I attend boarding school at the Martha Washington College in Abingdon. I was eager to learn music, and an excellent teacher was there. I nearly froze to death, though, and became very thin. The next year, I went off to school again, this time to the Powell School in Richmond. After only 2 years of formal education, it was decided by my mother and Papa that my 3 younger brothers would be sent to school. The expense was too great for me to have another year away as well. So, at the age of 18, I traveled to Washington, D.C. to visit my sister Gertrude and spent 4 months with her. A new world was opened to me of opera and theater. It was through my sister's husband, Alexander Galt, that I met his cousin Norman. We became the best of friends. After 4 years of close and delightful friendship, we married, and I went to Washington to live. My life would change forever.
Norman Galt died after 12 years of marriage. At the age of 43, Edith Bolling Galt married President Woodrow Wilson. She was one of the most influential and historically significant first ladies of the 20th century. President Wilson died in 1924, and Edith spent the remainder of her life promoting his legacy and vision for world peace. Her last visit to Wytheville was at the age of 88, just a year before her death in 1961. On that visit, she stayed at the hotel across the street that today bears her name, the Bolling Wilson Hotel. She dined at a restaurant located on the first floor of this building. And then, just as she had as a little girl, she climbed the steps to her birthplace and childhood home, the home that shaped her early years and prepared her for life as First Lady.